All right. Hi, everyone. In today's connecting conversation, we've got Corey Crockett here, and Corey's going to talk to us a bit about his experience working in television and film. Corey's another one of my longtime friends from college. So we worked together back in school and stayed in touch, and he's had some really, really cool jobs in the field. I feel like it probably doesn't seem super cool to you because you were the one doing it, but some of the stuff you've done is really neat. So let's start at the beginning. I think it was your internship at Powderhouse Productions. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, Powderhouse was slash is a production company in the Boston area.
Cool. So what did you start off with doing with them? And that was 8-ish years ago?
Uh, 11.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah.
So 11 years
Um,
ago.
yeah. So as part of requirement for our senior year in school, we had to do a full-time internship for a full semester. I was lucky enough to get in with Powderhouse. In the very beginning, I did a lot of, just menial office tasks, a lot of transcribing, a lot of research, a lot of just basically assisting the producers in the office with whatever that they needed. And then eventually the show that I was working on went from pre-production into production. So I got to go with the crew into the field and basically just be the gopher on set, making sure people had what they needed, lunch was set up, doing coffee runs, that sort of thing.
Can you, so I'm going to ask you to just to like define a few of those things. So can you tell us, what does it mean to transcribe? What is transcribing?
Okay, good question. Transcribing was, we would get our field tapes in, and I would listen to the audio and literally just type it all up to put it into a script form so the producers could take that script and then start to assemble the episode together.
Wow. Okay. So they took like just, is it like B-roll from the field? Is that what your field shoots were? Or was it like on, yeah.
I would just get the audio portion of it, and it would just be sent back quickly. It was low quality, but it was just so that what they had in the field was already in the computer in the office when the tapes got back.
Cool. Okay. And then a little bit more about like, what were your on-set tasks? So once you made it out of pre-production and you were on set, were you like coffee running guy, or did you get to do real stuff there?
Basically, you get to do as much as as they ask you to do. In the beginning, yeah, it's a lot of just getting coffees, making sure the set was clean, picking up garbage, setting up the crafty table where we have our snacks and drinks and that sort of thing, taking lunch orders. If we needed anything last minute, I would have to do a quick run out to get it to make sure it was available.
Cool. Okay. And so after your internship at Powerhouse, am I right that you worked there for a little bit afterwards? Did they hire you on after, or?
Yeah, they actually hired me pretty quickly, which I was lucky. So I worked there for, I think, 2.5 years.
Cool. So what kind of shows did you work on then? Once you moved from intern to employee, how did things change? What shows were you on?
So it's hard to remember exactly. Sometimes you'd be on a show for a week, sometimes you'd be on it for 3 months. So but I remember Powderhouse was sort of split into two factions. One was a lot of the Animal Planet shows, and then the other was more science and history. And I love animals, but I was more interested in the science and the construction shows that they were doing. So I worked on a show called Build It Bigger for a while, which was on the Science Channel, just about mega engineering projects around the world and what it takes to put them together.
So did you get the choice for those shows based on your interests? You weren't assigned to them?
I remember having a vague choice. One was, do you want to work with cats and kittens or do you want to work with construction equipment? And I said, I'll take the construction equipment. And then from then it's sort of just like, it was a smaller company. There might have been 25 people there, but once you work with a couple of teams, when they move on to the next project, they were kind enough to ask that I would be able to go with them.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting from all of these interviews so far, is once you've met some people, you just sort of network your way through the rest of it. So what did you do after Powerhouse? Do you remember what show or position came next?
Yeah, so at the time I was working on this show called Spontaneous Construction. It was kind of a disaster, but a flash mob was involved with a home renovation. It was odd. And so my contract was coming up and the show was being extended and I really wasn't enjoying it. And I got a call randomly from, I don't even remember who. I worked with someone who had recommended me. So this was a cold call, and I was asked if I was interested in joining a show called Flipping Boston, which is another home renovation makeover show. And it turned out it was better money, it was a better opportunity, and I wanted to network and start meeting and working with other companies. So I jumped on it.
Cool. So what was your responsibility for that show?
Initially, I was the associate producer and camera operator. So this show, we would have 3 or 4 major renovations going on simultaneously. There were 4 of us in the field, 2 producers, 2 associate producers. We would split off into 2 teams and just sort of make sure we were on site to document the major milestones of the renovation with our talent, our 2 hosts, Dave and Pete. So I would basically follow around our hosts with a camera as they checked in with their contractors and looked at the progress of the renovation. I had to keep field notes, back up all the footage onto a hard drive that I could then ship off to the home office and that sort of stuff.
So you're largely for most of your career, like in the field on set doing stuff.
Yeah, 90% of the time.
So I guess my next question about that before we go into the next show after would be, I would imagine with each of these productions, the equipment is different. So how do you manage switching different types of cameras or different editing software? Is it like once you learn one, you figure out the rest, or is that a consideration when you're hired? What does that mean?
I guess just for myself, I was lucky that when I first moved on to Flipping Boston, I should say, I was on that for a very long run, a little over 2 years, which is unusual to be on the same project for that long. So we were lucky. So I got very comfortable with that specific equipment that we were using, and I was intimidated by different sorts of cameras just because I hadn't used them before. But when I move on to the next project and they just hand it to you, you kind of figure it out. I mean, once you know how to use a camera, they're all sort of the same. You just have to get familiar with the menu options and that sort of thing. And so what I would do is I would ask to see the camera ahead of time and take it home and just play with it on my own, so that when I showed up the next day to film, I was a little more prepared.
Cool. Okay, cool. All right. So after that the Boston-based shows, what did you do next?
Good question. I think after Flipping Boston, I freelanced for a little bit in the area, just taking day gigs and a couple of weekend shoots here and there, even back at just down to the production assistant role, just to stay busy.
Yeah.
And then I had the opportunity, it was the same production company that had done Flipping Boston. They had a show down in Florida called the Vanilla Ice Project. Again, home renovation with a sort of certain flair. So I moved down to Florida for, I don't know, 8 or 9 months, and I worked on that there as a full-on field producer and camera operator.
Yeah, cool. So I think that's an important thing to chat about. So all of these students, like we're in Central Mass Gardner at a commuter college. And I think for a lot of these opportunities, you have to be willing to relocate at least temporarily. And a lot of these people have families, right? So most of our students are non-traditional. So can you talk a little bit about like, how does that work for you when you have to pack up and move for a few months? And what does that mean for like the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess I would just step back briefly that looking back now, I could see the sort of writing on the wall. When I started my internship and was getting into the industry, I don't think anyone that I worked with was over the age of 35, unless they were well into their 50s, and then they were, sort of the upper echelon of the company. Because it's hard to have a traditional family and work freelance in television. So yeah, it was tough to pack up and move. It was a great experience, but I literally wouldn't see my wife for upwards of 6 to 8 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And I think another important point to bring up is that when you're working on these shows, you're a lot of the time working 7 days a week, and you're working anywhere 10 to 12 hours is pretty much the standard per day. So it's a big commitment. It's really hard to make plans for the future or schedule a vacation because you don't know when or if you're going to have the opportunity to take some time off.
Yeah, you have to want to do it, and you liked it.
Yeah.
So were you on the show with Vanilla Ice for a couple seasons?
Yeah,
I feel like you were in Florida a lot.
Yeah, I did one full season and then started a second, and then I took some time away from the show, and I've been back 2 or 3 times to sort of fill in for a couple of weeks at a time.
Okay, cool. And then after that show, is that when you started the Treehouse, whatever, Treehouse Wars or something?
Treehouse Masters.
Treehouse Masters.
Excuse me.
We should have Treehouse Wars though. I feel like
Yeah,
it'd be
yeah.
fun. Anyway, Treehouse Masters.
Yeah, that might have been the next big show that I moved on to from there. And that was the best job I've ever had in my life.
Yeah,
But
that's what I really want to talk about. That one was cool.
yeah, the travel schedule on that one was just insane, to the point where, months into it, I would wake up and see a hotel room and be like, well, this is normal, but I don't even remember what city I'm in right now.
Yeah, I remember on that one year we were talking about like how on earth you were going to do your taxes because you were in Norway filming for a while, and that was just so weird. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you did on that show and how your role had shifted and things like that?
Yeah, that was just a blast to work on, because when I showed up, it was already well into its probably 6th season, so everything was sort of dialed in, and the crew knew it was a really smoothly running machine. So it was nice to hit the ground running on that. I was brought in as an associate producer, which was a little bit of a step back, but I wanted to work on the show. And within 3 weeks, they asked me to produce my own episode. So the first one was in Kentucky. That was great. My role, we would get an outline from the office. And so it would sort of highlight the major scenes of the show. We're going to come into the location, figure out where the treehouse goes, figure out the design of it, and then pull it off. This all takes place over the course of like 3 to 4 weeks. And along the way, there's a story that we, sort of thread through. But a lot of it on the day is just me walking around with the camera on my shoulder and checking in with the crew and coming up with things just spontaneously. So it was really fun. It was really creative. Yeah, I loved it.
So when you say that you started off, the associate producer was a step back for you. What was a higher level role than that?
Producer, field producer.
Okay.
It's sort of a hybrid role, shooter producer, I guess we would call it, because you are the camera operator, but you're also in charge of producing the episode.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think one of the there's like a career section at the end of the chapter that this video goes with, and it talks about how there's like a dozen different types of producer jobs, and you've had a lot of different producer jobs. Does it matter like on a resume? Do you do resumes, or is it just kind of, I know a guy, let me call him and bring him in? How do you transition between all of those types of producer jobs?
Yeah, it's tough to navigate. There have been times when I've applied for, I'd say, a more traditional video production role. And in the past, my resume has just been a list of credits, because it's just, I'm working, this is what I've done, this is where I've been. And they'll look at it and not recognize what a shooter producer is and have no idea what my responsibilities were. So it's sort of like an alien to them. And I would have to sort of explain, we do the same things, just in different environments. So yeah, after a while, it can be tricky to get out of that. If you've been in this groove of a certain production environment, it's sort of hard to transition out. Yeah, without the help of a colleague sort of giving you an in. Yeah. But also just I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, well, no, but I think it's important for these students to know, like, when they're looking for jobs, to read beyond just the title of them, because there's going to be 800 different titles for very similar jobs, is kind of what it sounds like.
Right. Yeah. So the role of producer on one production could be completely different from the role of another, let alone in the film industry of making movies. That's a lot of that is just fundraising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Producer means something totally different. You just slapped your name on something you gave a few $1 million to.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it can be challenging. I've definitely applied to some jobs because they've had the title listed, and then after interviewing for it, realized I'm nowhere near qualified for this. I haven't done 9 out of the 10 things that they require.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. All right. So after Treehouse Masters, was there another one after that?
Yeah, after that. So to circle back on the stress of constant travel, I was on the road with them for 10 months. I rarely was home. And so it started to really take a toll, and obviously I miss my family. So I had an opportunity to take a local job back home. So I transitioned to a show called House Hunters Renovation on HGTV.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a different role again. I had a project manager title. I was the liaison basically between the film people and the construction people, because I speak both languages. You know, my dad's in construction. I grew up around it. So I could talk to the construction crew and explain, give them expectations of what it's going to be like to work with a film crew, and take these LA people who've never been on a construction site and sort of, you know, run them through what it's going to be like to work together. Yeah, and I was on that for quite a while too, almost 2 years.
So most of your shows, I mean, you have a really, really clear interest in like combining construction and television work. Do you think if you hadn't had that background in working in construction that you would have picked this? Um, you know, like a lot of these students, I mean, we all have side jobs, right? Like even this teaching class is a side job in addition to my full-time one, right? So how do you think that side interest made you a better candidate for these jobs you were going for? Do you think it would have been harder to get into them if you couldn't speak both languages?
I think so. I think it would have been more difficult. I may have gone a different direction. I guess the reason I got into video production to begin with was my entire life as a teenager was revolved around skiing. It just was my everything. And I finally realized, you know, there's there's no career here for me. And I loved watching ski movies. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll make ski movies. I learned that I could go to school to study video, and then I just wound up in TV. It was just sort of the path that carried me. But I guess I should say, yeah, it was my personal choice to sort of gravitate toward these sorts of programs. And I think because, you know, a lot of shows are fun to watch that involve maybe drama and conflict between personalities, that just didn't interest me in the least to produce, because it just felt so artificial and so fake and phony. And so it was a little more rewarding, I think, to work on something that had like a concrete goal in mind. It's like we're going to build something, and at the end we actually get to see it done. So it just personally, that's what I gravitated toward.
Yeah.
You don't always have that choice. You know,
Right.
sometimes an opportunity comes along and you just take something that maybe not doesn't interest you as much, but it's still the same idea.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And so the other show, I guess maybe we skipped over it as I've been jumping around my questions because I can see it behind you is Sliced. Can you tell us a little bit about Sliced and what your experience was there?
Yeah, Sliced was the first show that I worked on at Powderhouse. So I started off as an intern, and then they hired me
That was the show. Okay.
to complete the series. Yeah, that was a show for History Channel. Unfortunately, only ran one season, but it was really fun. Cut things in half and figure out how they work.
Yeah.
Sort of show. So it
That was
involved.
like the hype of those internet videos too. All the YouTube videos we were watching about stuff getting cut in half.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was just like the simple idea that, and then brought a lot of science and engineering into it. So our host was sort of just like, you know, your classic macho machismo guy, and he would bring big tools and saws to slice things in half. You know, we sliced a fire truck in half. We cut an airplane in half. Vending machines. You know,
Cool.
every episode would have a big slice and a little slice.
Cool. So of all of the shows and experiences you've worked on, what was your favorite job and what was your favorite show? I think I know your favorite show, but those might be different questions.
No, they're both the same. Treehouse Masters was the best job I think I'll ever have. It just the right combination of the team that I worked with. There wasn't a single person on the construction crew or the film crew that I wouldn't have enjoyed having dinner with one-on-one. They were just a great group of people to work with, very passionate about what they do and very talented. So it was just very rewarding, and also just the creativity that I was allowed to experience. Just there, it was a very loose play box. Basically, it's just, you know, they would sort of give me an outline, and I was free to fill in the middle as I found interesting to me.
Yeah.
So we would play games together and turn it into something that would show up on the episode. And a lot of times it wouldn't work out, but it was just fun to interact like that.
Cool. Okay. So I guess one of my last questions for you would be, as these students are all starting out, what kind of things can they do on their own, right? Like aside from the assignments we give them to do, what can they be working on to start figuring out the direction they want to go in this field now?
That's a really good question. One of the great things about technology is that, you know, this here is better than any camera I worked with for the first, you know, 8 or 9 years of using cameras. So the technology is a lot easier and more available. If you are interested in cameras, just get a camera. It doesn't matter, and shoot video, shoot photos, whatever you want to do. If you think you might be interested in editing, start putting things together. Just put some time into it. And as my friend Matt Kroll says, be careful what you get good at. If you're
You'll see Matt in a couple weeks. Matt's
yeah.
on chapter 11.
So, he's good people. Yeah, so if you become known to be good at something that you don't enjoy, maybe not advertise that you're good at it, because down the road you might find yourself a few years in and you're still doing the thing that you didn't care to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important tip, because a lot of this work is kind of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But as you get deeper into it, you need to be more in control of that so that you have a balance with the rest of your life and everything that's going on. You don't want to spend 7 days a week at a job that you don't want to do.
Yeah, and you have to be your own advocate too. I remember, working on a couple of quick shows in Powderhouse where I was just in the office all the time, and it would be maybe a newer boss who didn't know my background, and I would just start dropping hints like, hey, I know how to use a camera, I know how to shoot, and pushing for it. And eventually, if you get the opportunity, it can lead to more of the work that you enjoy.
Yeah. So even with all of your producer titles, most of what you do is camera work, right?
That's the main through line. Yeah. I should say that the camera work is what got me into it, and then to stay there I learned how to be a producer.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. So I guess my very last question for you would be, in addition to the shows that you worked on, what other kind of like random side gigs have you picked up just here and there and in between contracts? Because I know you've done some stuff with music and concerts, and you've talked about the little weekend gigs. Can you just share a little bit about what those look like for, because those are things maybe some students could get into now, right? Just a short-term one night kind of deal.
Yeah, for sure. And it really does help to know people. Your professors a lot of times will know people who work professionally in the industry and can help make those contacts for you. So recently I've been working at a big concert venue up here in New Hampshire, shooting major acts. It's not a high paying job, but it's really fun. I've got to see a lot of cool concerts, and it's just put up on the big screen. Sometimes it's recorded and broadcast on the internet, but most of the time it's just the live concert shooting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good avenue for students to look into who aren't ready to relocate, and maybe you're just looking for a part-time side thing to get into it and figure it out. And that goes along too, like if you happen to love music and television, there are ways to nudge into both of those. Like we spoke with someone from a record label a few weeks ago in these career conversations, and they all meld in this. I'm getting the same overarching theme from all of you, is that it's networking. So even if it's not a long-term job, if you like it enough to do it, it's kind of worth just doing it, because you might meet somebody while you're there that has another gig with an open spot and things like that.
And you find a way to be memorable. Sometimes I'll just wear a silly hat so that people remember, hey, that guy wore the Elmer Fudd hat. I remember working with him. And it doesn't matter, you don't have to be the guy who stays there well past everybody to show off that you're better. It just be memorable, be personable, take the time, have a conversation.
Cool. Awesome. I think that's a good starting point. This is about 25 minutes, which is great. So thank you very much, Corey. I appreciate all of your willingness to sit and answer these barrage of questions from me.
Yeah, happy to.